Revealed. Why I unexpectedly left my son's wedding after an incredible snub by the bride. Frank stood outside the church, the vibrant blooms lining the sidewalk seeping in a cruel reminder of the life he had built with grease-stained hands. He had dedicated his 40s to a mechanic's grind, pouring sweat, heart, and relentless faith into every car he repaired, into every dollar earned for his family. Today was supposed to be a celebration, bursting with pride as his son, Jake, married Emma, the daughter of a wealth magnate. But now Frank felt the chill of inferiority creeping in, the reality of his modest upbringing colliding with the facade of glamour surrounding him. Their love, warm and sweet, had built a bridge between two worlds, but now, standing amidst the designer-clad crowd, Frank's heart sank, realizing the chasm felt insurmountable. Emma's curt replies when he tried to connect felt like knives, each one stabbing at his fatherly pride. Why couldn't he shake this uneasy feeling? Jake deserved happiness. He wanted to support his son, not be an anchor dragging him down. Yet, a voice in his head echoed doubt, questioning if blue-collar values were enough for a world that seemed to mock them. Amid the glistening front rows filled with the elite, Frank tried to breathe, to focus, but the anxiety tightened like a vice around his chest. When Emma took the mic, he thought perhaps this was a moment of goodwill. The crowd hushed, expectant. But as her eloquent words poured forth, praising her family's legacy, he felt more like the outsider, an unwelcome intruder in this affair. Her acknowledgement of hard work and loyalty, delivered with a sneer, cut deeper than the sharpest blade. He could feel the temperature drop, the blood rushing to his head, drowning out her voice, echoing humiliation. Did she really believe she was superior? As he clenched his fists, every word she uttered transformed from admiration to a personal affront. It felt like the ultimate rejection, a public trial of his worth. His mind raced, hurt mingling with anger, an overwhelming cocktail of emotions churning within. Before he knew it, Frank was outside, knees weak beneath him, breath unsteady. The radiant celebrations faded into the backdrop of his turmoil. This was not how it was supposed to be. Shouldn't he feel joy watching his son start a new chapter? Instead, he felt robbed. The values he instilled now mocked under the bright lights of affluence. A wave of desperation washed over him, a quest for belonging gnawing at his insides. How could he ever measure up? And what about Jake? Frank's heart ached for his son, witnessing the rift begin to form. Torn between his father and the woman he loved, Jake's struggle was a stark reflection of Frank's own turmoil. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Suddenly, a door swung open, and Jake appeared, panic etched across his face as he searched for his father. The stakes were high, the very fabric of their relationship at risk. Should he challenge Emma and the weight of her legacy? Anger bloomed anew in Frank's heart, but so did a pulse of resolve. He wouldn't allow himself to be overshadowed, to let his values drown beneath wealth and facade. The tension hung thick in the air, a storm brewing, leaving you wondering if Frank would reclaim his dignity, or if Jake would choose a world that shimmered with illusion over the solid ground of loyalty. Frank took a deep breath, his chest tight with a mix of anxiety and determination. He couldn't let this moment define him or rupture the bond he had with Jake. The distance between his humble, hard-won existence and the opulence surrounding him felt palpable. Yet he refused to let the weight of inferiority pin him down. As Jake approached, the look in his son's eyes bore a blend of confusion and concern, a reflection of what Frank feared. Would his son feel compelled to choose sides? "Dad, are you okay?" Jake's voice trembled slightly, a string of fatherly affection woven through the urgency of the moment. How could Frank relay the internal chaos roiling within him? He opened his mouth ready to voice his pain, but words escaped him, replaced with the vision of his son stepping into the affluent life that took shape around him. Something shifted inside Frank. It was not just a matter of being a blue-collar dad anymore. It was about imparting wisdom that had lain dormant beneath the layers of his self-doubt. I'm here for you, son, he finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. Just remind yourself who you are. Jake's brow furrowed, and for an instant, doubt flickered in his eyes as well. That fear clawed at Frank. Could he really impart that wisdom? Did he have the strength to be that father? To guide his son through the turbulence of conflicting worlds? The church bells rang out, an echo of celebration laced with reminders of his own failure. He was losing control, staring disdainful glances from Emma's family. Should he confront her now, at this moment of vulnerability? It seemed reckless. Yet Frank felt a surge of conviction flare within. He wasn't limited by societal expectations, his worth anchored elsewhere. I'm proud of you, you know that, right? Frank searched Jake's gaze, willing him to understand the depth of his words, the gravity of family love. Sometimes pride comes from hard work and honesty, not just from the money or status you wear. A flicker of recognition sparked in Jake's eyes. He hesitated. I want to make you proud too, Dad. But everything feels twisted. Emma, she's not who I thought she was. The realization hit like a punch. Here was the crack in the facade, a shared struggle. Jake was wrestling with choices that mirrored Frank's own battles against perceived inadequacy. Suddenly, they weren't just father and son, but allies in navigating a world that spun on values starkly different from their own. That truth reawakened something dormant in Frank. A sense of purpose, an understanding of legacy beyond material wealth. I'll help you figure it out, he said, each word a declaration, a promise. You deserve happiness, and so do I. Let us not lose ourselves in anyone else's expectations. Yet as they stood united in the face of uncertainty, the humdrum sounds of celebration faded. Frank sensed eyes shifting toward them, judgments silently exchanged among the elite crowd. Would they see the struggle or merely mock it? It was a thin line between acceptance and rejection, and Frank found himself teetering on the edge. Maybe confronting Emma was the path he needed to take, not out of vengeance but from a place of integrity and self-worth. The weight of the decision loomed as he exchanged glances with Jake, both men reflecting the fight within. The moment was coming, the storm of confrontation brewing just beneath the surface. Frank's heart raced. The time had come to face Emma, to establish who he really was, not just as a father, but as an individual who refused to bow down. As they turned to re-enter the church, a sudden wave of adrenaline pulsing through his veins, Frank's resolve solidified. He would not allow the affair to continue unchallenged. It was time to reclaim his voice and navigate this chasm between pride and acceptance. What awaited them as they crossed the threshold of bright lights and staring faces? Would Frank's confrontation shatter preconceived notions, his own, and those of the crowd surrounding them? The moment they stepped back into the church, Frank's senses heightened, the air thick with tension and unspoken judgments. The lavish decorations, once a symbol of celebration, now loomed like a gilded cage around him. He gripped Jake's shoulder tighter, their silence a shared armor. This was a battlefield, and he needed to navigate it carefully. His heart thundered in rhythm with his resolve. He caught sight of Emma as she stood across the room, surrounded by her family, laughter spilling from her lips in sharp contrast to the storm swirling within him. It took every ounce of self-control to keep his feet anchored to the ground. The last time he had seen that smile, it had wrapped around him like a warm blanket, but now it felt like a mocking reminder of betrayal. This was no longer an emotional confrontation with just her. It was a larger reckoning about the boundaries of love and loyalty. Stay put, he whispered to Jake, feeling the weight of his son's gaze bore into him, both an anchor and a cross to bear. He turned toward Emma, a raw determination surging within him. Each step felt heavier, as if he was breaking through a haze of denial, each footfall dragging him closer to a reality he couldn't avoid. Emma, he called, his voice steadier than he felt, drawing the attention of the crowd. The whispers fueled his anxiety, but he stood tall, the fight within him rising to the surface. She turned, surprise flickering across her face, briefly breaking her polished demeanor. Frank, she greeted, her voice smooth and rehearsed, though Frank could sense an underlying tension. What brings you here? The question felt like a slap, dismissing everything he had sacrificed, everything he wanted for Jake. I need to talk to you. It's important. He tried to keep his composure, wanting to articulate the mix of emotions simmering beneath the surface. Now. Here? She said, incredulity lining her words, glancing at her family as if seeking permission. The unwelcoming air thickened around them, compressing his lungs. Yes, here. It's time to stop pretending, he shot back, his voice sharpening. There was no backing down now. He couldn't afford to let her play the victim while turning her back on his son. You can't just waltz into our lives and twist everything in your favor. A collective hush fell over the congregation, the glitz of the wedding lingering like a shroud, stifling. Emma's expression flickered defiance tempered with a hint of guilt. Frank pressed on, feeling the unshed tears of fury and hurt pooling dangerously close to the surface. Jake deserves better than this. He deserves honesty, not lies wrapped in fancy words and glitter. Emma's gaze darted nervously to Jake, who stood at the threshold of their conflict, confusion painting his features. The fear that gripped Frank tightened. He had fought to shield Jake from this world, hoping to cultivate his sense of self amidst its chaos. Now that protective barrier was shattering. What do you mean? She finally asked, her facade cracking slightly, revealing the vulnerability beneath the poised exterior. Jake told me everything, Frank stated, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he stepped closer. Enough to ensure only she could hear, but loud enough for the surrounding eyes to take in the confrontation. You need to tell him the truth or leave him alone. He is worth more than second-hand love. The silence held for a moment longer, tension coiling tightly until it threatened to snap. Emma's carefully constructed world teetered on the brink, and for a fragment of a heartbeat, Frank felt powerful, like a lighthouse amidst shifting tides. But would this moment shake her resolve, or would she fight back, drawing Jake deeper into her storm? The stakes were higher now. Frank leaned in, a fierce flame igniting behind his eyes, determined to protect his son at all costs. He could not fail Jake, not when the potential for a new beginning loomed on the horizon. But what would Emma choose? Would she admit her missteps, or would she double down, intertwining their lives further in webs of deception? The answer lay heavy in the air, waiting to be uncovered. Frank's heart raced, the tension in the air coiling tighter, stifling him like a snake. Emma was still processing his words, her eyes flaring with confusion and something softer, perhaps regret. The moment hovered between them, heavy with the weight of their shared history and the unresolved questions that hung in the balance. He felt a surge of determination. This was not just about confronting Emma. It was about claiming a newfound sense of authority in his life, about standing tall for Jake. Why can't you just be honest with him? Frank pressed, his voice a low, intense whisper. He watched as Emma's composure cracked, revealing the uncertainty she had tried so hard to mask. He deserves a mother who tells him the truth, not someone who drapes lies in a beautiful dress. The words hung thickly in the air, and for a fleeting moment, guilt flickered across Emma's face. It was a fleeting enough expression that if he hadn't been looking directly at her, he might have missed it. Frank felt rage simmering just beneath the surface. Even now, she wore a mask, concealing the truth behind layers of social expectations. I don't owe you an explanation, Frank, she said, her tone icy, but he could hear the slight tremor beneath. You don't understand what's going on. You never did. He scoffed, anger swirling within him. I don't. You think I'm standing here because I want to? You think this is easy for me? His voice rose with every word, anger propelling him forward. I'm doing this for Jake. I want him to grow up knowing that love means honesty, not empty promises and games played behind his back. The murmurs of the gathered crowd started again, a buzzing cacophony that made his head spin. He turned slightly, catching Jake's concerned expression, and it anchored him momentarily. He had to maintain his resolve. His son needed to see that strength wasn't only about enduring. It was also about confronting uncomfortable truths head-on. Stop this. Emma shot back, her voice now tinged with desperation. Do you think this is easy for me? I'm trying to protect him. Protect him? By lying? By hiding? That's not protection. That's betrayal, he countered sharply. The righteous anger ignited a fervor in him as he fought to maintain his footing amid the gathering storm. What will he learn from you? That love is conditional? That family is built on secrets? Is that how you want him to grow up? Emma's shoulders sagged slightly as if his words had rooted themselves deep within her. For just a moment, perhaps, he caught a glimpse of vulnerability through her rigid exterior, and it took him by surprise. He realized she was struggling with his accusations, perhaps even questioning her decisions in that eye blink of honesty. "Just listen to me for once," she murmured, her tone softening, but her voice still carried an edge of defiance. "This is complicated." "Complicated?" Frank echoed incredulously. "Life isn't complicated. People are. We make our choices, Emma. You made choices that put us in this situation. This is about truth. Truth is the first step to rebuilding any trust." He took an unsteady breath. Her gaze faltered, and he saw shadows of fear flit across her features. Fear of losing Jake, fear of losing control over the narrative. But this was no longer about her. It was about giving Jake the chance to build his own narrative, one grounded in reality instead of illusion. He stepped closer, solidifying his stance. "You have a chance to change this, Emma. To rewrite your role in Jake's life. Don't waste it." The room felt electric, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her reply. Frank could sense the tide shifting. He stood on the edge of a precipice, knowing that to move forward meant risking everything. "Will you tell him the truth?" As that question hung unanswered, Frank's heartbeat quickened again, pulse racing with uncertainty and hope. Would Emma take the leap? Would she finally step away from the complex web of deceit and find the courage to be the mother Jake needed? The answer lingered tantalizingly out of reach, the silence vibrating with unspoken potential. Just as he thought he saw a flicker of resolve ignite in her eyes, a familiar voice called out, shattering the fragile moment. "Emma, are you all right?" It was her father, marching toward them with authority, a stark reminder of the expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Frank felt an immediate chill wash over him, a dark premonition settling in the core of his being. Now he thought it was or never. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the opportunity slip through her fingers once more? The stakes had never been higher. This was a pivotal moment, a juncture in their lives that could change everything. As he awaited her response, it became clear. The battle was far from over. Frank's breath hitched as he felt the influence of Emma's father swooping in like a storm cloud, casting shadows over the flickering light of their fragile moment. He distanced himself mentally from the crowd, whose expectant gazes felt like daggers beveled for judgment. In that instant, the weight of not just his choices, but the implications for Jake threatened to push him back into the shadows he had fought so hard to escape. "Emma," her father said, his voice booming but tinged with concern. "What's going on? You can't just stand here." Frank saw her visibly shrink under the scrutiny, the strength she had just shown evaporating instantly as if pulled by the tide of her father's authority. Vulnerability swept through her features, and he sensed the pulling power of her father's expectations dulling her resolve. "Dad, please just a moment," she said, glancing back at Frank. Despite her faltering resolve, her eyes seemed to plead for understanding, a desire to balance her personal fear with a maternal instinct. But the hesitation was all too human, revealing layers of doubt and societal pressure that Frank knew could consume her. Feeling the tides shift, Frank's awareness sharpened. Was this where he would falter to? The instinct to back down surged within him, igniting a battle not just for Jake, but for himself. Was he truly ready to carve a path out of the tangled mess of their lives? He thought of the man he used to be, how often he had avoided confrontation for the sake of peace, allowing his own silence to speak volumes. "Emma," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady as he stepped to her side, facing her father head-on. "She's trying to make a profound decision right now." Emma's father's eyes flickered with indignation, disbelief that someone would dare speak over him. "She doesn't need to make any decisions here." He cast a look of disdain, but Frank pressed on, the fire igniting within him. "This isn't just a matter of family loyalty, it's about being real with Jake. It's about showing him the strength that honesty can bring. It's about empowering him to navigate his own relationships." Emma's father scoffed. "You're out of line, Frank. You clearly don't understand the sacrifices made to protect family." Frank felt the heat of the moment blaze brighter. Sacrifices built on lies are not protection. That's a prison of isolation instead. He felt the anxiety of the crowd creeping back like a toxic cloud. But this was larger than any audience. It was about setting a precedent. The tension in the air seemed to transform, electric and charged, and though Frank was steeling himself against the storm that was Emma's father, he couldn't shake the fear of potential repercussions. He could already envision the consequences of this confrontation, a backlash, painted in bitter shades of familial ruin. Yet wasn't this what he had asked of Emma? To embrace vulnerability, to face the tumult head-on? Will you acknowledge the truth, Emma? He pressed, turning back toward her, his voice softer now, laden with urgency. Jake's future hangs on this. This is your moment to step into who you can be, not just for him, but for yourself. In that heartbeat, he witnessed as she folded her arms tightly around herself, her walls rising. Yet the flicker of defiance was there again in her eyes. A firmness that perhaps, just perhaps, ignited something dormant inside her. A truth that could fracture us all? She whispered. Yet her voice trembled with a delicate strength. Frank felt a weight lift off him momentarily. As if the very air around him was shifting. He could sense the ever-pressing external forces receding. That was not his battle to fight. His battle lay in getting Emma to reevaluate herself, to find her voice in this cacophony of expectation. But what you don't realize is that a fractured truth can guide healing, not just pain. Besides, isn't it worth risking a little discomfort to build a solid foundation for Jake? As the words fell from his mouth, he felt their power, and in that moment, a small realization crystallized. He was ready to redefine his own relationship with vulnerability. Emma's father huffed, exasperated with the scene playing out before him. You think you can dictate how this family operates? How this girl know this woman should act? Frank inhaled deeply, battling the immediate urge to respond with a retaliatory edge. It was more powerful to stand firm in his belief. It's not about dictating, it's about showing her the courage to own her choices and stand against your expectations. Emma's gaze wavered between them, her heartbeat quickening. Could she find strength in herself? The moment teetered on a precipice of transformation. And Frank held his breath, waiting for her to leap forward, or pull away into safety. In that suspended silence, Frank realized this wasn't just Emma's crossroads. It was his own. He felt an unusual clarity, rising within, a determination to nurture their paths towards honesty, no matter the cost. Would Emma seize the moment, confront the hurdles, and give their son the richness of truth? Or would she shrink back, letting fear dictate an unchosen narrative? Each second stretched, pregnant with possibility. The next step could redefine their lives forever, for better or worse. And Frank understood that the true test of himself was not in delivering a speech, but in learning to support others in taking their rightful steps. The challenge loomed, filling him with relentless anticipation, a realization that carried a storm of its own. Would he take the courageous leap that mirrored his own call for honesty? Frank's heart raced, a drummer's tattoo echoing off the walls of his mind, a relentless reminder that this moment was unlike any he'd faced before. The indecision hanging in the air was palpable as he observed the subtle changes on Emma's face. The uncertainty etched across her features signaled an internal battle. She stood at a precipice, and he could either pull her back or give her the momentum to leap. Emma, he urged, leaning closer so that only she could hear. This isn't just your crossroads, it's about Jake's future too. Don't let fear silence your truth. Her shoulders tightened, and he felt her fear wrapping around both of them like a heavy fog. The winds of expectation from her father howled loudly. Yet within Emma's gaze, he caught a glimpse of rebellion battling against a lifetime of conditioning. Frank's breath hitched once more. It felt like they were standing before a chasm that could either swallow them whole, or lead them to freedom. What are you so afraid of? He pressed, digging deep for the right words. You're not just a reflection of your family's choices. You can redefine who you are, break free from what others expect. He sensed a shift, as if she was unsure whether to step into the light or retreat into the shadows. The silence thundered, every moment stretching far beyond its natural length. Frank felt the heat of her father's disdain seeping into the very marrow of his bones, but his focus remained solely on Emma and the flicker of possibility shining through. Maybe you don't see it, but your truth holds power, he continued, his voice steady, holding on to the sincerity that washed over him. You felt it all along, the tightness in your chest, the weight on your shoulders. You deserve a chance to shape your narrative. Emma's eyes shimmered, and hope danced at the edges of despair. A small breath escaped her, caught somewhere between fear and liberation. This moment held a power that neither of them fully understood yet. She was more than a daughter in a conflict. She was a woman on the brink of an awakening. Yet Frank's past loomed ominously in the backdrop, a reminder of his own tendencies to cower. Memories of times when he had failed to confront his own fears clawed at him. Would he allow himself to become the man who avoided discomfort yet again? Or would he push through the painful junction, set a new precedent, not just for Emma but for himself? Stand up for yourself, he urged softly. You owe it to Jake and to yourself to make a choice that resonates with who you are. As if harnessing a hidden well of strength, he witnessed her inhale deeply, and the walls around her crumbled slightly. The defiance simmered just beneath the surface, and with it, hope ignited a flicker of courage. Her father's presence felt like an electric charge, but Frank sensed that Emma's inner storm was converging into a singularity of resolve. They both had endured too much abandonment of truth in the name of family loyalty. The irony hung thick in the air. They were trapped not external forces, but by the very ideals they had upheld for too long. Frank's chest tightened, realizing how critical it was for Emma to navigate this moment. It wasn't just giving her a voice, but offering validation that her truth could anchor their lives in authenticity. Yet he felt the same fear creeping back into his consciousness. What if she faltered? What if Emma receded into agreement, forsaking this window of potential? Emma, he whispered again, the urgency rising. I believe in you. Speak your truth. With a deliberate nod, Emma took a step forward, though it was not just her movement that caught Frank off guard. Her gaze hardened, a steely fire igniting deep within those once nervous eyes. She was confronting her father, moving past the barricades that had long held her captive. Dad. Her voice carried a weight it had never borne before, a poignant mix of trepidation and defiance. I need to talk. Frank stood on the sidelines, but felt the tremors of those words shake the very foundation of their shared reality. Emma was stepping onto a stage of her own making, and every ounce of him wanted to leap into that space beside her. Would she find her way, shattering expectations in the process? Or was this another fleeting moment that would dissolve into regret? Instinctively he reached out, not to commandeer her power, but to reinforce it. In that small gesture, he felt the connection between their aspirations, igniting a hope that perhaps he, too, could evolve amidst the chaos. As she took a breath to articulate her truth, the surrounding noise fell away, leaving them enveloped in profound silence. Frank steadied himself, bracing for the ripple effects of her impending revelation. Change was on the horizon. But what exactly would it bring forth? Each second passed with the weight of an eternity, an electricity crackling in the air, revealing that in moments of uncertainty, true courage could be birthed from vulnerability, lighting the path toward reclamation for both Emma and himself. Frank watched, breath held. As she prepared to speak, the air thickened with the clarity of impending truth and the unmistakable thrill of possibility. Would this be a moment of triumph? Or would unexpected doubts pull them back into a cycle of silence? The answers loomed just ahead, waiting for the moment to explode into reality. Emma's voice faltered for a moment as the gravity of her declaration settled around them, but the intensity of Frank's gaze provided a silent anchor. It was an unspoken pact. She would speak, and he would stand witness. Dad, I can't do this anymore, she began, her voice trembling yet resolute. I need to be honest with you. Frank leaned forward instinctively, wishing to shield her from whatever repercussions awaited. He could sense the shifting dynamics in the room as her father's expression darkened, challenges unfolding like an impending storm. Yet here they were, at a crossroad defined by the act of speaking one's truth. And Frank found a flicker of courage had ignited deep within him as well. I've spent my whole life trying to fulfill your expectations, Emma said, her words gaining momentum. The perfect daughter. The perfect student. It was never me. I've been carrying this weight, and I won't hide anymore. Not for you, or anyone. As the words poured out, Frank felt an exhilarating concoction of pride and anxiety flooding his veins. This was more than a confrontation between Emma and her father. It was a monumental step for both of them, a pathway carved from their shared fears and buried aspirations. Emma, don't, her father interjected, his voice rising in alarm, echoing the authority he had exerted for far too long. There was a break in his tone, a rift revealing just how threatened he felt by this sudden authenticity. "You don't understand what you're saying." "No, I think I finally do," Emma replied, and her words landed with the weight of a hammer striking metal. "This isn't about you anymore. This is about my life, my dreams, and Jake's too." Frank's heart thudded in his chest. This was the crucial moment every part of his being had been leaning towards. He could feel his resolve solidifying, like a hardening sculpture sculpted from turmoil. Emma's courage became infectious, urging him to confront his own fears yet again. Could he truly support this burgeoning rebellion? "I have dreams, Dad," she continued, anchoring deeply into her conviction. "I want to explore art, to live authentically and travel. I can't do that suffocating in expectations that aren't mine." Her father's face blanched, and for a moment, it felt as if time had frozen, leaving just the three of them suspended on this precipice. Frank sensed her father grappling with disbelief and disappointment, the very fabric of his identity fraying at the edges. Frank recognized this battle. A part of him had lived it, shifting between comfort and the painful rupture that accompanied truth. "Don't you dare question our family, Emma," he barked, a feeble attempt to regain control over the situation. But Emma wasn't flinching. She stood unyielding, illuminated by a newfound resolve that swirled around her like a protective cloak. "No, don't do this. You don't get to dictate my life anymore." Her voice cracked, but it only reinforced the authenticity of her revolt. Just as Frank had urged her to stand up for herself, she was doing it, literally breaking the chains of expectation with each syllable. "Please just think this through," he pleaded, desperation seeping into his tone. Yet Frank sensed something shift within Emma, a burgeoning sense of liberation solidifying with every challenge she laid bare. The girl who stood before them now was undeniably formidable. Every moment stretched and warped, and Frank wrestled with the visceral temptation to intervene further, to protect her in the name of ensuring she was safe from whatever backlash might ensue. Yet, in observing her fiery resolve, he understood that this was her battle to claim. "Emma," he said softly, his voice suddenly breaking through the din of conflict. "What do you want?" Her eyes flickered to him, softening for just an instant. "I want to choose my path, Frank. Not just for me but for Jake. I need to be the woman I'm supposed to become." Somewhere between the fears of familial backlash and budding claim of independence, Frank felt an awakening stirring within himself. This confrontation, though loaded with tension, was also a mirror held up to his own held-back aspirations. For far too long, he had been a spectator in his own life, shackled by the expectations of others. In that moment, watching Emma unearth her truth, he faced a startling realization. Perhaps it was time for him to confront his own past choices and break free as well. Suddenly, the stakes felt undeniably high. Their interweaving stories brushed against the potential for both reclamation and turmoil. As Emma's declaration hung in the air, Frank realized he faced a decision of heart-stopping clarity. Would he allow fear to dictate his every action, or would he embrace the transformative potential before him? The distant shadows of abandonment and neglect loomed, but within that darkness, the light of newfound determination crackled with intensity. As he reached out once more, a fire ignited between them, illuminating their paths with the promise of possibility. Would Frank find the courage to illuminate his own truth, just as Emma had begun to craft her own? "Emma," he murmured, renewed clarity coursing through him. "You've inspired me. Let us take this leap together." In that brief juncture, the foundation of everything they had known shook, crackling with the electric promise of futures waiting to be claimed. And as they both braced for the reaction to this seismic shift, Frank could feel the tide of change surging, ready to engulf them in its relentless wave. The air hung heavy with the unspoken words as Emma's father processed the magnitude of their revelations. Frank, emboldened by the turmoil of their conversation, felt a deep-seated apprehension ripple through him. It wasn't just Emma who stood at a precipice. He was peering over the ledge of his own unfulfilled ambitions and doubts. "You really think you can just leave? Leave us all behind for what?" Her father snapped, desperation creeping into his voice. The anger and confusion simmering beneath the surface created an electric charge in the room. Frank could feel the energy pulsing, saturating the atmosphere with the tumult of suppressed emotions. The gravity of her claim reverberated, challenging every family dynamic they had lived by. Fractured by her father's incredulity, Emma clenched her fists, determination coiling around her like a spring ready to release. In that moment, Frank felt an understanding surge within him, a light flickering on in the darkest corners of his own psyche. This wasn't just a battle between Emma and her father. It was a mirror held up to his life as choices, a reminder of the dreams he had relegated to the sidelines. He stood taller, savoring the breakthrough blossoming within him even as fear clawed at his insides. "There's a choice here for both of you," he interjected calmly, his voice breaking through the fray with surprising steadiness. "Emma is choosing her dreams, but it doesn't mean you need to terminate the relationship. Maybe your expectations are what stand between you, what makes her feel trapped." Frank's mind turned over the complexities of their situation like a puzzle yet to be solved. He remembered how he had navigated similar tumultuous waters with his own relationships, the compromises he had made, the silence he had allowed to fester. He felt an unexpected surge of empathy for Emma's struggle, the need to sever the ties of expectation that choked authenticity. Emma looked over at him, a mix of hope and uncertainty flaring in her eyes. This confrontation was not merely for her liberation. It had become a catalyst for Frank to confront his own convictions. Private dreams felt suffocated beneath the waves of disapproval and obligation that had long been woven into the fabric of his life. "Dad, this is my life, my path," she repeated, urgency creeping into her voice. "You need to accept that or risk losing me completely." Frank felt as though he were holding the delicate threads of their collective future in his hands. He turned his gaze back to Emma's father, who appeared more vulnerable now, fatigue creeping in around the corners of his eyes. "Perhaps accepting will be the first step towards understanding," Frank proposed cautiously. His heart raced, rehearsing alternative futures where they chose connection over conflict. The silence pulsed like a heartbeat, magnifying every unexpressed thought and feeling. What could he say to shift this tide toward recovery? Part of him yearned to be a protector, to say something that would ease the pain, but another voice whispered of risk, of stepping boldly into the unknown. "I've seen too many times how holding on to expectations can carve out someone's identity until they no longer recognize themselves," Frank added, his words laced with conviction. "Both of you deserve more than that. You're not just father and daughter. You're individuals capable of evolving if you'll let each other." The raw honesty in his tone began creeping into the stillness. Emma's father shifted, searching Frank's gaze with a blend of disbelief, anger, and perhaps begrudging acknowledgement. As each second ticked by, tension coiled tightly, but beneath, a flicker of understanding sparked in the depths of uncertainty. Emma stepped forward, allowing her shadow to meld with his, lending an air of solidarity. "Let us break that cycle together," she urged, her voice quietly fierce. Frank's heart surged. This was the alliance he had always wanted. Yet, somewhere deep within him beckoned a question that remained unformulated, hiding in the recesses of his thoughts. He sensed that they were on the edge of something monumental, but the pressing unknown loomed large. What would happen if they embraced vulnerability and unfolded their true selves? Would the warmth of acceptance blossom, or would it wither in the harsh light of confrontation? As the moment hung in hesitance, Frank's mind galvanized. The question remained: could each of them shed the oppressive expectations that shaped their reality, or would they fall back into familiar patterns of silence and estrangement? In that silence, the pulse of their intertwined fates thrummed louder, beckoning change. Something had transformed in this brief convergence of thoughts and fears. Could they navigate this chasm together? Or would the unseen boundaries they each carried rip them further apart? The weight of the air compounded with uncertainty, and Frank knew they stood on the brink of an event that would define them. The weight of the moment lingered, drawing heavy breaths from those present. Frank, aware of the pivotal nature of this confrontation, felt a churning mix of anxiety and resolve. He cast a sideways glance at Emma, the determination in her eyes illuminating the darkness of their situation. Yet it was her father's unreadable expression that intrigued him the most. It was a mix of defiance and vulnerability. After what felt like an eternity, Emma's father finally broke the silence. You think you can just run away? This isn't just about you, Emma. It's about your family, the sacrifices we've made. His voice trembled, engulfed in a torrent of emotions. Dad, I wish you could see that I am not running away. I am choosing to stand for who I am, Emma replied, her voice strengthening with each word. Frank felt the heat of her conviction warming the room, pushing back against her father's desperation. He sensed the shifting dynamics, realizing he had an opportunity to expand on his previous thoughts. But it required more than mere observation. It required action, vulnerable honesty, a mirror beyond his own reflections. Emma's desires and dreams are not chains binding her. They are wings waiting to take flight, Frank interjected, dismissing the residual tension in the air. Sacrifices don't mean relinquishing oneself. Sometimes they mean nurturing growth, even if it doesn't align with your expectations. Emma's father recoiled slightly at Frank's words, as if struck by the weight of their implications. But rather than retreat, he clenched his jaw. And in that moment, Frank could see all the battles he had fought both within and outside his own relationships. This was their shared struggle, the fight to redefine roles, aspirations, and love. Frank stood tall, standing firmly alongside Emma. True love means letting someone be who they are, even when it frightens you. Not categorizing individuals by the roles you expect them to play, he added, daring to dive deeper into the vulnerabilities that had plagued their family unit. The atmosphere crackled with a paradoxical mix of hope and tension. Emma's father looked back and forth between them, the weight of years of expectations pressing down like a heavy cloak he was reluctant to shed. You think you can talk to me about love and acceptance when your own life is filled with unfulfilled potential? He shot back, his voice tinged with bitterness. His betrayal of their proximity stung. Only in moments of pain could truths reveal themselves. Yet Frank didn't flinch. In that moment, a buried fire within him ignited, igniting his own truth. You're right, he responded, his tone steady. I've spent too long putting my aspirations on hold to fit into an expected mold. But I realized that two wrongs won't make it right for Emma or for any of us. We're all deserving of a life that fulfills us, even if we walk divergent paths. The eyes that once reflected only despair began to shimmer with new insights, and an unfamiliar tenderness settled over the room. Emma shifted closer to Frank, bolstering her conviction with his support. They had laid bare their vulnerabilities before each other. Was her father ready to meet them halfway? Dad, you may never fully understand my choices, but I promise that taking this leap is me honoring both my dreams and this family, Emma urged, her voice softening. Emma's father visibly wrestled with the magnitude of her statement, and a distant glimmer of acceptance flickered through the dim clouds of his defensiveness. The room narrowed around them as they stood on the precipice of a breakthrough. Frank could see it in their eyes, the possibility of tearing down walls they had built through years of misunderstandings. Yet, beneath this potential transformation, fear lingered like an unwelcome guest. Would they relinquish their fears and embrace this new tether of vulnerability? Whatever happened next would define their relationships in ways neither could predict. Frank could feel the palpable tension resting just beneath the surface, a reminder that while they were closer to understanding, the distance and the battle was not yet overcome. But as he looked at Emma's father, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time, Frank understood that they were at the very edge of something new. Would they dare to leap together or retreat back into the familiar confines of their expectations? And while he pondered that momentous question, he realized the true essence of what he had to confront within himself. His own fears of taking that leap. The air was thick with uncertainty, reverberating with the powerful crossroads ahead. Would they choose acceptance or remain mired in the shadows of their past? Frank could feel the answer lurking just out of reach. The moment hung suspended in tension, each heartbeat echoing with possibilities both daunting and liberating. Frank stood steadfastly beside Emma, his heart pounding as they collectively faced her father. Their confrontation had unearthed long-buried truths, not merely for Emma, but for Frank himself. Dad, you don't see it yet, but my choices will not diminish our family. They'll redefine us, Emma declared, her voice unwavering. It reverberated with resilience, striking a chord of hope within Frank's chest. Whatever lay ahead, they would forge a new path fueled by authenticity, echoing the values Frank had always cherished yet had feared were being overshadowed by expectation. Her father's expression twisted between disbelief and bellicosity. Yet, Frank observed a flicker of vulnerability lapse through those hardened brows. This man, who had wrought a legacy of taciturnity and surveillance, was now peeling back layers of his own challenges, the burden of expectations weighing heavy on his shoulders. "Are you suggesting that stepping away is the same as letting go of the family?" he asked, voice wavering. "No, Dad," Emma responded, stepping into the space his words created. "I'm saying that I want to find my footing while still loving our family. That's not mutual exclusion, it's mutual growth." Frank witnessed a shift, not just in Emma's father but also in himself as he realized that their battle was not one-sided. Their roles intertwined in complex ways. He had engaged in self-doubt, but now hungered for the chance to affirm his own aspirations. The revelation lit the way forward. He could bolster Emma while also standing firmly in his own truth. "I spent years believing that my worth was tethered to others' recognition, waiting for someone to validate my existence," Frank interjected, the fervor of his revelations brimming with vigor. "But I've come to realize that true love, whether it's for a partner or a family member, demands letting each person explore their journey while holding on to each other tightly." Emma's eyes locked onto Frank, and in that moment, they understood this was about more than just Emma's struggles. It was about both of them dismantling their pasts, equipping them to forge clearer pathways for the future. Together, they had ignited a spark that could lead to renewal. For the first time, Emma's father appeared to contemplate Frank's words, a strum of realization crossing his face. "So you think trading comforts for uncertainties is the answer?" "I think," Frank said firmly, "that embracing uncertainty is the only way we can grow past the lines that have held us captive." The tension in Emma's father began to shift, slowly turning into something softer, something more uncertain. Perhaps they could navigate this unpredictability together. Perhaps he had been too embedded in his own fears to see the clear paths they could carve collectively. "Emma," he ventured slowly, "I see you. It's clear now how much you desire to break free. Maybe I haven't been the father you needed me to be. But this doesn't have to be a point of capitulation, it can be the doorway to growth." The air thickened with sown seeds of hope as Emma's father absorbed her words. In that charged moment, Frank leaned in, grasping every ounce of connection he could muster. "What we need," he urged quietly, "is for each of us to courageously face our truths. It's not merely your decision to step out, but for us to redefine what family truly means with love, acceptance, and honesty at its core." Emma's father nodded slightly, the weariness swirling in his eyes, showing that he understood no one was merely giving up traditions, but rather transforming them with deeper meaning. "Perhaps," he murmured, uncertainty lingering but tempered with tentative acceptance, "we can chart a new course together. One built on understanding." Frank felt a rush of relief. The tides were shifting, and the sun of possibility began to penetrate the clouds of doubt. In the days that followed, as they worked to define their new boundaries, Frank felt an exciting transformation. No longer was he just a mechanic with grease-stained hands. He was an architect of change within his family. At work, he found a renewed zeal for sharing core values not just with machines, but with his flying dreams, and little by little, he started to mentor younger mechanics, emphasizing the importance of their passions beyond the shop floor. The subsequent months unveiled profound progress. The tools of communication became the new engines behind relationships. Frank and Emma's father opened lines of dialogue, allowing vulnerability to flourish. And that first Thanksgiving post-confrontation, Frank stood beaming, staring lovingly at his son and the woman who had historically defined his familial relationships. The air was lighthearted, illuminating the kitchen filled with laughter while they prepped dinner. The table was resplendent with dishes prepared not merely from recipes, but from a place of shared truth. Amidst the laughter, he reached for Emma's hand, grateful that their journey, while born in the flames of confrontation, had blossomed into an exquisite tapestry woven with resilience, connection, and boundless love. As Christmas approached, Frank mounted that little shelf in his garage, an odd memorabilia, a figurine of a car with a full tank of gas. "It's South time to drive forward," he murmured, sealing every shred of resentment wrapped in past expectations. This was the moment he knew he had truly become the individual he wanted to be. one of purpose, integrity, and unyielding love. He felt fulfilled, recognized not just as a mechanic, but a man of immense worth filled with concrete achievements and grounded values. The experience galvanized his spirit, and he had every intention of sharing that journey moving forward. Frank's heart fluttered with pride. They were developing a legacy, one built on honesty that would empower future generations. As he turned to join his family, confident in the transformative steps they were taking together, a smile spread across his face. He had conquered the barriers of past expectations, flinging open windows to a boundless future. This was just the beginning, not merely achieving but living boldly. If you resonated with this journey of heartfelt transformation and want to experience the next motivating story, you need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive emotional tale we tell. Leave a like now to help feed the algorithm and support our channel. Comment below, sharing your reactions and theories about this remarkable journey. The conversation is just beginning. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how powerful personal growth can truly be.